Turning now to Puerto Rico, where new information has been released following the discovery of unused Hurricane Maria aid in a warehouse. Officials released what they say is a full list of the aid found inside that warehouse, and it highlights where the aid went, when it was delivered, and how much of it was distributed. So meantime, the government has yet to release a list of all aid locations. And demonstrations have begun on the island, with hundreds of protesters chanting outside the governor's mansion in San Juan, calling for her resignation. This all comes 1 week after the Trump administration released heavily restricted Hurricane Maria aid, months after the scheduled deadline. FEMA has responded to criticism of the delayed aid, saying that they will continue to impose stringent fiscal oversight due to the island's significant history of fiscal irregularities. Buzzfeed reporter Brianna Sacks has been following these developments and joins me now from Los Angeles. All right, Brianna, let's talk about this. Governor Vazquez fired both the emergency management director and the Department of Housing director following the warehouse discovery. Is this going to impact the remaining aid that has yet to be released for the hurricane aid, and also the aid that has not been released for, the hurricane aid, but also the earthquake aid? I can't. I was so stunned. Right, I was so stunned that the Hurricane Maria aid was only just being released. It's easy to get your sort of timelines confused. But anyway, do you think that this is going to have an impact? Because when FEMA talks about a history of irregularities, here's Exhibit A. Look at this warehouse.
Right. No, FEMA contends that it will not change its rolling out of aid despite this scandal with the warehouses. FEMA says it's going to continue to work on the ground with Puerto Rico and promises that nothing will change in terms of getting the aid directly to the people. To me, FEMA says it actually has 7 warehouses in Puerto Rico and has doled out, at the request of the Puerto Rican government, millions of pallets of water, tarps, cots, and they didn't respond for requests for comment as to who is, where that aid has gone. They don't really know, but they said it's the responsibility of the state to make sure that aid gets to the people. It was a pretty stern statement from FEMA, but as far as I know, and as what they have said, they're not pulling back in any way. And, they just released, Trump just, FEMA confirmed that $39.5 million grants had been approved almost a day ago to build a new hospital, which actually was devastated in Hurricane Maria in 2017.
All right, so that's good news. We haven't seen the results from the 48-hour investigation that the governor ordered into the status of aid across the island, not just that warehouse, but, what other warehouses are out there. So we haven't seen the results of that yet. Why is that? And how do you suppose that impacts, the trust that people have in the government?
Yeah, that was surprising because, the governor quickly took action after this scandal broke. She fired her emergency management director, as well as 2 other high-ranking officials, and promised an immediate investigation, which would be completed in 48 hours. The 48-hour mark came and went. There was still no investigation. People started protesting. They already have a deep mistrust in the government because of the hurricanes in 2017. Then she announced the investigation was concluded and is turning it over to the Justice Department for a more in-depth probe based on the recommendation of her Special Investigations Bureau. So no one really knows what this investigation says. We just know it's completed and the Justice Department is looking into it. But, people want answers, and that has sparked protest for about 2 or 3 nights now outside the Capitol, as well as the governor's palace.
So speaking of those protests, and we've seen some pretty high-profile people getting involved, like Ricky Martin. Last time we saw protests like that, the Governor Rosell, was forced to step down, and then no one wanted the job. We went to the next person in line and the next person in line, and it was actually really difficult to get somebody to take that job. So then I have to ask, there are calls now for the current governor to step down. Will that be helpful or harmful to the island?
At this point, I think it's a very divisive topic because some people at these protests are yelling back, well, who will take the job? Like, who's going to come in instead, as angry and hurt and fed up as Puerto Rican residents are, and they want the governor to resign. There really isn't anyone next in line that we have seen residents cheering for or rallying behind. So I think that's the big question right now, is like, if she were to resign, who would be able to take the job? But she's scrambling. She's been very active on Twitter, firing back at allegations that she knew about these warehouses, and that she was involved, or maybe overlooked them. So it's a lot of drama also going on right now with the officials that she did fire, who have come out and said, actually, she knew about this. Like, these warehouses were in her emergency management plan that she signed in August. So she should have known what was here. So there's a lot of also mistrust going on within officials, and a lot of finger pointing as to who knew these warehouses were there, stocked with tons of needed aid for people who were still sleeping outside, after all these hundreds of earthquakes have continue to hit their region.
All right. Brianna Sacks, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed.
Yeah, thanks for having me.